My lying wife stabbed me in the back, and my mother took her side. Years later, I made them regret everything. Recently, I discovered that my former alcoholic wife had relapsed into alcoholism. While she slept, I stumbled upon a text conversation between her and a close friend of mine, revealing that she was having an affair. Initially, I struggled to accept this revelation, but when the full weight of the situation hit me, I left home with the intention of ending my life. Fortunately, I managed to gather myself and spent the night outside instead. The next morning, my wife bombarded my phone with texts and calls, wondering where I was. She noticed that my work van was still in the driveway, but I was nowhere to be found. I replied to her messages, claiming that my van had engine trouble, and I had gotten a ride to work. She seemed to buy my excuse and responded with a simple, "Okay." In reality, I went to my friend's house and spent the day with him. He advised me to keep a low profile, investigate the situation, and consult a lawyer to explore my options. Around 6 o'clock, my friend dropped me off at home, utterly exhausted from the day's events. The adrenaline had drained me, leaving me physically and emotionally drained. As soon as I walked through the door, I sensed something was amiss. My wife immediately bombarded me with questions about work. Annoyed, I asked her why she even cared. She explained that she found my large flask and lunch bag on the front passenger seat. Sensing that something was off, I was on the verge of confessing everything, but my exhaustion got the better of me. I couldn't be bothered with any pretense. I simply admitted that something was indeed wrong. I told her that while putting her drunk self to bed the previous night, a message popped up on her iWatch. I read it, along with the others, and discovered her disgusting infidelity. I made it clear that I wanted nothing more to do with her. In an instant, her demeanor transformed from a person in control to a frightened little girl. She burst into tears, but I walked away, heading upstairs to take a shower. When I finished showering, she was still sitting on the top stair, sobbing. The excuses poured out immediately. She claimed she was drunk, vulnerable, and that it was a one-time mistake. She insisted that the messages from the other person didn't mean anything, and that she would never have followed through with the affair. It was as if she had a playbook, saying everything that others had predicted she would say. The only thing she didn't attempt was blaming me. She likely knew I would have shown her the door if she had. I informed her that I wanted a divorce and demanded that she vacate the house within a month. I also assigned her to the spare room. Since then, I have been mostly ignoring her, scowling and shaking my head when she starts spewing nonsensical excuses. I have no interest in hearing them. To my surprise, when I confided in my parents about the situation, my mother sided with her. She adamantly opposed throwing my wife out onto the streets. My mother claimed that my wife had made a mistake and urged us to resolve our issues like adults. She argued that we had been through too much together and that my wife's actions were mere words. I couldn't believe it. In response, I scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer for next week to discuss my options and seek justice. Overall, the situation is emotionally exhausting, but I am determined to find a resolution that ensures my well-being and holds those who have betrayed me accountable. Update 1. It has been 20 days since I discovered my wife was cheating on me with my friend, and the situation has become unbearable. I gave her a month to leave, but she has been sleeping in the spare room and doesn't seem to have any intention of going, especially after influencing my mother. However, her lack of options is not my problem. I have consulted my divorce lawyer multiple times and am currently preparing a divorce petition to have my wife served with divorce papers. I have also opened my own bank account and withdrawn 50% of the balance from our joint account. The atmosphere in the house has become strange. The living room has turned into a no-man's land, as neither of us spend much time there. We mostly stay in our respective rooms. Initially, I completely ignored her, but after reading about the 180 technique, I have started implementing it. I have been civil, albeit a bit cold towards her. I'm glad I made this change because I was starting to feel like a monster for ignoring her existence. It was not the right way to behave, and I ended up feeling like the one who had wronged her instead. The only time I deviated from the 180 was when I walked into the bathroom last week and found her crying on the floor. I helped her up and instinctively gave her a hug, although it was more of a comforting gesture than one filled with love. Sadly, I am now so suspicious of her that I wouldn't put it past her to be waiting for me to come in, just to put on a performance. This toxic environment is causing these irrational thoughts. She has been claiming that she will do anything to save our marriage and prove that her affair was just a mistake. So, I mentioned a lie detector test. I have no intention of actually getting one done and wouldn't even know where to start, but I wanted to gauge her reaction. Surprisingly, she was initially supportive of the idea. However, a few hours later, she came to me with a tablet, explaining how inaccurate lie detectors are and how anxiety and nervousness can lead to false readings. I just laughed it off. Another noteworthy development is that the friend she cheated with is no longer on speaking terms with any of our mutual friends. I exposed him on social media a few days ago, and our friends have all turned their backs on him. It's actually quite supportive to see. I have discussed this situation with my mother several times, and during a heated argument, I asked her why she was taking my wife's side. I wondered if there was something she wasn't telling me. She explained that she's always seen my wife as the daughter she never had but always wanted. She has been attached to my wife since we got together, and they have a close bond. My wife doesn't have any family, and her few friends are busy with their own lives and families. So, if I were to kick her out, she would be completely alone. My mother suggested a compromise, proposing that we reassess the situation in 3 or 4 months to see where we stand mentally. She's also urging me to try couples counseling before giving up. However, I'm not interested in that. The thought of being in the same house as my wife makes me feel sick. If things get worse, I am prepared to walk out the door and never return. I can't continue living in this house and maintain any self-respect. It's crucial for someone to keep their word in this mess. If I do decide to leave, my best friend has offered me a place to stay for a few weeks until I sort myself out. However, if I do walk out that door, I am done with my mother. I will never speak to her again. She will probably see it as me giving up on her. Update 2. Since this morning, I no longer consider that house my home. I noticed on the calendar that my wife had an appointment with her ophthalmologist, so I took advantage of her absence to gather my belongings and move out, which I have done. After organizing my things, I left the house keys and the divorce papers I received from my lawyer last week on the kitchen table. I have blocked both my wife and mother's numbers, and from now on, any communication with my wife will be through my lawyer. As for my living situation, I'm staying with a friend temporarily, but I hope to have my own rented place before Christmas. It has been a few weeks since I last spoke with my mother, and our last conversation was through text. During that exchange, I tried to convey to my mother the hurtful things my wife said to the cheater in her texts, particularly the one about being able to keep a secret. It deeply wounded me, and I explained why it hurt so much and why I no longer trust her. In response, my mother texted me back, saying she couldn't talk to me when I was in this state and that she would give me space to cool off. She attempted to call me a few days ago, but I ignored her call. Today, I have blocked her number as well. I feel incredibly betrayed by my mother, and at this point, it almost feels worse than the initial betrayal from my wife. The way I'm feeling now, I don't think I will ever speak to her again. Update 3. It has been over 7 months since my wife first cheated on me, and I thought that was the end of it. However, I received a phone call that has pulled me back into the mess. I have moved 15 miles away, changed my phone number, and I am still in the process of divorcing my wife. Unfortunately, she has completely ignored all requests from my divorce lawyer to cooperate, which has hindered the process. We are now applying for deemed service and attempting to have her officially served by the courts. If she continues to ignore me, I can proceed with the divorce without her input. While at work, my best friend called me to inform me that my dad was trying to get in touch because my mother is not well. He asked if it would be okay to give my dad my number. I agreed, and my dad called to inform me that my mom is in the hospital. She is stable, though not in great condition. I was shocked since I hadn't heard my dad's voice in a long time, and he sounded very emotional. He told me that my mom really wants to see me, so he asked if I would meet him at the hospital and go in to see her with him. I agreed, and arranged to meet him outside the hospital. As the time to leave my house and visit her approached, I was tempted to back out at the last minute. However, I knew I needed closure, and that I would regret it if I didn't go and something happened. When I arrived at the hospital parking lot, I felt a sense of paranoia and half expected my wife to jump out from behind a bush. I met my dad at the entrance, and it was quite awkward when he tried to hug me, and I declined. I made it clear that if my wife was present in any way, I would leave immediately. He assured me she wasn't, and we proceeded to the ward where my mom was. When I saw my mother, I was shocked by her appearance. She looked extremely frail, with a black eye, bruising, and discoloration on one side of her face. She had taken a serious fall, breaking 2 ribs, shattering her elbow and hitting one side of her head on the ground. Despite her condition, she perked up when she saw me. She told me how much she had missed me and that she wasn't sure if she would ever see me again. I reminded her that if she had truly wanted to reach out to me, she could have done so. We discussed what had happened, and she explained that she was on the ground for a few hours before my dad found her. She expressed her determination to get back to normal and mend our relationship. I brought up my wife and mentioned that I had been pushing for a divorce, but she was either ignoring the letters or not receiving them. My mom admitted that my wife was still in the house, and my dad looked uncomfortable. I looked away in disgust. My mom then started talking about how lost my wife is without me, and that she is not doing well. It became clear to me that nothing will change, and my wife has not had an epiphany or gained a new perspective. She simply wants things to go back to how they were. My mom told me that the house is still my home and always will be, but I told her that I no longer want it. It holds no meaning for me anymore, and only brings back bad memories. I stayed for less than an hour in total. When I left, I told my parents not to wait by the phone for me to call because it might be a while before I do. As my dad walked me out, he asked if I would keep in touch with him, and I said I would. I'm unsure if that's the right decision, but time will tell. When I got home, my emotions were all over the place, ranging from sadness to anger. However, I'm glad I went. I couldn't help but think about my wife and what she once meant to me. It will always hurt. Update 4. I'm nearing the end of my divorce from my wife. She has signed and sent the divorce papers to my lawyer, so now we just have to deal with the formalities. She apologized through a message relayed by my dad, admitting that she was wrong to hold me back and acknowledging that she can't salvage our relationship. She expressed the need to move on for her own well-being. I expressed gratitude for her realization, and she stated that she doesn't want anything from the divorce. She plans to move out as soon as she can support herself, which I am okay with. Regarding my mother, I haven't spoken to her yet, but my dad informed me that she is doing much better after leaving the hospital and returning to a normal routine. I'm uncertain about how things will unfold with them, but I have made it clear that if the house is going to be mine, I want it transferred into my name for security purposes. Once that is settled, we can start working on rebuilding our relationship. Time will tell. I have begun therapy and have had both phone and in-person consultations with a psychiatrist. These sessions have been immensely helpful in allowing me to openly discuss my feelings and experiences, even if only for a short time. During one of these conversations, my psychiatrist said something that deeply resonated with me. When I was lamenting about how my best years were in the past, she reminded me that my best years are the ones I have ahead of me. Her point was that the past is gone, existing only in our minds, while the present is real and offers opportunities for growth and fulfillment. I intend to keep this phrase in mind whenever I feel down. Overall, things are progressing, and I am taking steps to move forward and make the most of my current circumstances. Update 5. First things first, I am now officially divorced. It feels like a weight has been lifted, but also marks the firm end to what was nearly a third of my life. Recently, I unexpectedly ran into my ex-wife for the first time in almost a year. It happened while I was entering a shop in the town center after visiting a friend. As I walked in, she was walking out, and our eyes met. She mumbled something that I couldn't understand, and we stood there staring at each other for a few seconds before I continued inside. As I wandered around the shop, a wave of sadness washed over me, and I had to take a moment to compose myself. It just goes to show that one look can instantly transport you back to square one. Do I miss her? No. I miss the person I believed she was, but that person no longer exists, if she ever did. However, I do not wish her any harm or suffering. I have made a conscious decision to let go of any hatred in my heart, because I know that it will only burden me in the long run. Additionally, I recently learned from my friend's girlfriend that she is certain she saw my ex-wife with another man outside a pub in the city a couple of years ago while we were still together. Apparently, she never mentioned it to me because she wasn't sure if it was her and didn't want to interfere. On another note, I am struggling with my relationship with my parents. I feel complete apathy towards them, and no matter how hard I try, I don't think that will change. My dad has been making efforts to rebuild our relationship, but I simply don't care anymore. I know it may sound harsh, but it is the truth. However, the most significant event that has occurred recently is that I almost died. At the beginning of the year, I had a terrifying experience when I accidentally cut the back of my trouser leg on a metal bin at work. I didn't realize I had a cut until I went home, and that night, I started feeling strange. I woke up around 2 a.m. with my leg pulsating. I felt extremely ill, experiencing double vision, dizziness, and alternating between severe fever and chills. I immediately suspected sepsis and called an ambulance. My thoughts were racing, and I was hyperventilating. Surprisingly, the only thing that calmed me down was accepting the possibility of death. Once I embraced the idea that it might be over, I no longer felt fear. I'm not sure if it was the acceptance of fate or something else, but it simplified everything and brought a sense of calm. I've been reflecting on this experience a lot lately, and it has made me realize that when it comes to cheating and betrayal, a similar acceptance is necessary. You have to acknowledge that what you had is gone, and if someone is willing to betray you so mercilessly for their own satisfaction, it's time to let go. Fighting an unwinnable battle may be noble, but when the odds of success are like winning the lottery, is it really worth it? Is the pain worth it? I don't think so. It's only when we have lost everything that we are truly free to do anything.